Shalom, Ben-Shalom here to discuss several points about the operation in Gaza. Some questions have been asked. We discussed in a different video the road leading until this point and various general aspects about the Palestinian Authority in Gaza and the difference between them. Today, let's talk about the operation itself. First, why did we get to this point? Well, technically, Hamas launched a barrage of rockets at Jerusalem on Jerusalem Day last week. Israel responded, as we always do in such cases. And one thing led to another, and here we are after several days of an operation, intense fighting, continuous rockets coming down from Hamas, and Israel operating in Gaza from the air, from the ground, not in Gaza on the ground, but attacking military targets, terror targets, and strongholds throughout Gaza. And as far as the goals of the operation, I get asked a lot about this. What are the goals? What is Israel trying to achieve? Well, first, we must believe that there are goals because after the Second Lebanon War in 2006, one of the main takeaways was that we have to have very clearly defined goals. So that's the way the IDF operates now. So they are written and there are clear orders and the IDF has goals. And one of the reasons we don't publish them is that if the enemy knew our goals, maybe they would be able to calculate when the operation will be over, and we don't want them to do that. But we can, by what's happening now, we can imagine that the goals are to take away as many capabilities as possible from Hamas and to deliver such a blow that they will recalculate next time they launch rockets at Israel. So the idea, as always has been in Israel, to create a long period of quiet or calm or containment between major wars or campaigns like this. I think I see a difference this time. The blow is so devastating to Hamas that I think the period will be very long. So it's much more than just creating a year of quiet. Maybe this is a game changer even as far as recalculating on Hamas side. Certainly Israel also has to recalculate after this operation. It's always a good question, what is Israel's strategy? We never have a written strategy. But whatever the strategy was so far, probably Israel should recalculate the strategy and decide what our long-term goals for Gaza are. How successful was the operation? Good question. I have intense arguments with my colleagues and friends. So you see that even retired senior officers from the IDF looking at the situation right now understand it very differently. I see Israelis, and again with a military background, that are not impressed and that they think that the IDF is attacking so-called real estate targets, like a building here, a building there. Well, I don't believe it. I think it's much, much more than that. The IDF, for its own reasons, is not boasting it. Perhaps this has to do with perception of the other side, maybe even surprise, maybe even some modesty creeping into the IDF. But from what I see, Hamas, the terror organization that controls the entire Gaza Strip, have been delivered a serious blow to their capabilities. The IDF actually took out, completely eliminated entire arrays of capabilities that we would have seen perhaps later on in this campaign, maybe in future wars. And by this I mean, first and foremost, the tunnel apparatus, the entire structure of tunnels under the Gaza Strip, crisscrossing through the Gaza city. This was supposed to be a strategic asset for them, especially in fighting against IDF soldiers on the ground, if and when we do go in, what we call the ground maneuver. And this was taken out, or a huge part of it was taken out in a really major operation by the IDF, preceded by a campaign to deceive the other side and make them think we're doing a ground campaign, when in fact we were not. Still not clear how many terrorists fell for it, how many went underground and were actually killed in this operation. Perhaps even this part of the operation was not as successful as expected, not clear yet, and we may never know even. But certainly the infrastructure itself has been devastated, toppled, and again, the major capability of Hamas for the ground campaign has been taken away from them. Other capabilities are submarines, or maybe we should call them underwater vessels, but loaded with with explosives that were supposed to detonate on Israeli ships and oil rigs. Many of them were taken out and destroyed. And many other capabilities like launching pads and anti-tank rockets, a huge threat for the south on the border. And all in all, it seems like the IDF changed its tactics, and instead of starting slow and pinpoint targets and slowly escalating and reaching towards the end of the campaign the high value targets, it looked like from day one they took out the big targets. As far as the capacity of strikes, it seems like the IDF dramatically increased its capabilities, of course, especially the IAF, the ability to take a huge amount of aircraft simultaneously, have a long list of targets and just take them out all at once. As always in the Gaza Strip, especially in the Gaza Strip because it's so densely populated, all precision munitions, so each bomb has its target, all military targets, which is why it's always a huge challenge for the IDF to minimize damage to civilians, to uninvolved, what we call non-combatants. Certainly people are killed in Gaza because of the situation in Gaza, because the way this terror organization fights, positioning weapons embedded within civilian population, actually physically launching from schools, mosques, and hospitals. So they turn into military targets, and then when such a target is hit, then people nearby or within could get hurt. When we take out high value targets like these high rises, housing multiple offices of Hamas, R&D, intelligence offices, then we, an hour in advance, tell everyone to leave. We fire a small ordnance on the roof, making sure that everyone leaves, and only then, when we made sure that no one's in there, then we topple the building. So even here, even if it is a terror infrastructure, I think the IDF is doing its utmost in order to prevent and minimize civilian casualties. But still, minimize, that means there will be people killed, and that is always a tragedy, each and every one of them. When will it end? Very good question. So far, it seems like the international community supports Israel, and I say this very carefully because many of you may look around and see the criticism in the media. Friends, we have a huge challenge in explaining what we do. The clash of narratives is there, and certainly it's easy to look at images from Gaza, see the devastation there, and think, the bad Israelis are bombing Gaza. But only when you see the overall picture, you understand that. So when I say support to Israel, I mean mainly politically, world leaders, the world powers. We saw previous campaigns in Gaza and in Lebanon where they end with a UN Security Council resolution, or brokers coming in between and brokering a ceasefire. It could be that it will wind down to something like that. But as we speak, the IDF continues to work, mostly in these cases because Hamas fired the first shot and they continue to fire rockets. It's usually up to them. So when they stop firing rockets, it ends, right? I'm not sure that's the case this time. It seems like the IDF, more than ever before, has a clear plan of dismantling this terror apparatus. They say clearly, and I believe it, that they still have more to move forward in this plan. So the IDF, there's no sense that they are in a rush to end this. They're working methodically, to continuing, moving on, pushing forward with their plan day by day. And it seems, even though Hamas won't admit it, it seems like Hamas are wishing for this to end, looking for a way out, trying to use their friends in the region to get a ceasefire. But again, until this is brokered internationally, or if what we call the hourglass runs out at a certain point somewhere down the road, then maybe we will meet at a ceasefire. Is another round around the corner? Could be, and this has always been the reality on the ground here. My assessment is that this will take a long time. That Hamas, when they come from their underground tunnels that have not been toppled, they will be amazed and shocked at the devastation, at the capabilities that were taken out. And I think they will understand this as one huge miscalculation on their part. They launched this, and we knew, by the way, Israeli intelligence knew they were going to launch this before the Jerusalem Day holiday for their own reasons, to gain support in the Palestinian community, to be perceived as the defenders of Jerusalem. In a way, by the way, they may have succeeded in that, but as far as the devastation to their organization in Gaza, it will take them a long time to rehabilitate. What is the way forward for Gaza? Amazing question. I'm not sure I have an answer. I think that it's not an Israeli problem. Well, certainly it is a problem because they're in our backyard and we are confronting them now, but I don't think the solution will come from Israel. Even on a day-to-day basis, when Israel is criticized for the situation in Gaza, remember that Gaza has a border with Egypt, a border. Okay, so they're not sealed off by Israel that controls everything inside Gaza. Theoretically, they could have a wonderful relationship with Egypt and get everything in and out of Egypt. Why doesn't it happen? Because I think Egypt sees Gaza just as we do, as a terror stronghold, and they treat it as such. So moving forward, it's not like tomorrow morning we're going to push for rehabilitation and Hamas is suddenly going to turn into this Western entity that thinks just about prosperity. Never going to happen. Don't forget that Hamas, in its charter, vows to annihilate Israel and establish a Muslim entity from the river to the sea. That means we're gone. Jews have no place here in the eyes of Hamas. And they will not rest until they achieve this goal, even if it takes another 200 years. So this is not about economy and prosperity, even though Israel on a day-to-day basis invests huge efforts, of course, for electricity and water and all, by the way, as we speak. So in a way, it's strange because Hamas terrorists drive pickup trucks to launch rockets at Israel. The gas that they use for their pickup trucks comes from Israel, as many other things. One more point I forgot to make is since Hamas launches locally made rockets, many of them backfire, about 20% hit inside Gaza. So there's a lot of damage also to infrastructure. A lot of the power grids have been taken out by Hamas rockets. They, by the way, hit very close to the Egyptian border, almost killed Egyptian soldiers. And many civilians have been hit, injured, and killed by Hamas rockets. So the situation in Gaza altogether, as far as rehabilitation, the day after will be a huge challenge. But even here, I'm sorry to say, even if the international community does get together to help the poor Gazans and pours money back into this terror organization, they're going to do with that money what they did so far, and that's not invest in hospitals and schools, but to rebuild their capabilities, to rebuild the tunnels. Those tunnels cost a lot of money. So most of their budget, most of the money coming into Gaza goes to terrorism, goes to weapons, and really, it's really a shame. Remember that when we talk about the Gaza-Israeli conflict, it's not like who are you for? For the Gazans or the Israelis? That's easy. I would say, what are you, for the terrorists? It's more than that. Be for the people of Gaza, for the poor people of Gaza that are oppressed by a terror organization that doesn't care about them, that sacrifices them, that makes them human shields, and ultimately their life is miserable because of this brutal regime that rules them. That's all for now. I'll come back with an update in the next few days. I don't think, my estimation, this is not going to end in a day or two, so we'll meet again.